October 28th, 1991. Gloucester, Massachusetts. An ordinary Monday. The air smells of salt and diesel. At the docks, fishermen check nets under a gray sky that frightens no one. October is always gray in New England. Seagulls screech over rusted hulls. In the harbor, the coffee is hot. Radios murmur routine forecasts. No one knows the ocean has already begun to prepare itself. Gloucester has lived off the sea for nearly 4 centuries. About 29,000 people. Simple economy, fishing, tourism, shipyards. In 1991, fishing technology is good but not perfect. GPS is starting to show up on fishing boats, but civilian accuracy is limited. Weather radars that see clouds, not the future. VHF radios that work if the waves don't wet them. And an unwritten rule: if you need money, you go out even if the forecast isn't ideal, because swordfish don't wait, and neither do bills. But the Andrea Gale is not here. She is already out on the North Atlantic. 72 feet of steel, 6 men aboard. Billy Tyne, the captain, has had 2 bad trips. He needs a good catch. Bobby Shatford, just turned 30, has a girlfriend waiting for him. Dale Murphy has 3 young children. They all need this trip. They all know late October and November bring storms. No one talks about perfect storm yet. That name will come later. What no one sees: 3 systems in motion. To the north, a cold front descends from Canada like an invisible guillotine. Polar air, dense, hungry for space. To the south, warm air rises from the Gulf, loaded with moisture and energy. And further east, over the mid-Atlantic, something worse. Hurricane Grace, Category 2, spinning counterclockwise, pumping warm air northward like a giant engine. 3 systems, 3 directions, 1 collision. The National Hurricane Center in Miami tracks Hurricane Grace. Forecasters at the National Weather Service watch the coastal low, the nor'easter, begin to sharpen in a way that makes them sit up straighter. The isobars close. The pressure drops. But this is not a clean category, not a simple label. It is something rare, a convergence that can turn ordinary forecasts into warnings. One of them writes in his notes, "Perfect conditions for explosive development." The word filters out: storm, perfect. The science behind this is brutal in its simplicity. A nor'easter is already a powerful winter storm system. When it absorbs energy from a hurricane, even a weakening one, it can become something unprecedented. Hurricane Grace, though downgraded, still carried enormous thermal energy. As it moved northeast and began to be absorbed by the developing nor'easter, it did not just add wind, it added fuel. The warm, moist air from Grace fed the nor'easter like gasoline on a fire. The atmospheric pressure at the storm center would eventually drop to 972 millibars, extraordinarily low for a non-tropical system. For context, normal atmospheric pressure at sea level is 1,013 millibars. The lower the pressure, the more violent the winds trying to fill that vacuum. Every millibar drop means stronger winds, higher waves, more chaos. Bob Case, a senior meteorologist at the National Weather Service's Boston office, watched the data with growing concern. He'd been forecasting weather for decades. He'd seen bad storms, but the computer models showing this convergence made him pause. The Canadian cold front was moving faster than normal. Hurricane Grace wasn't dissipating as quickly as expected, and the nor'easter forming off the coast was intensifying at an alarming rate. He made calls. He updated forecasts. He used language meteorologists reserve for the worst scenarios. But there's a gap between what a forecast says and what people hear. A gap between numbers on a screen and what those numbers mean when you're in a 72-foot boat 600 miles from land. 5 weeks earlier, September 20th, 1991, the Andrea Gale sets sail. Billy Tyne casts off in the afternoon. The sky is overcast but calm. The forecast speaks of rough weather later in the season. Manageable. He's sailed through worse. They all have. The plan is simple: head east to the Flemish Cap, a sandbank 600 miles from the coast where swordfish gather. Fish hard. Stay long enough to make it worth it. On land, girlfriends wave their hands. Mothers don't sleep well when their sons are at sea, but it's an old fear, familiar, one you can live with. The Andrea Gale disappears over the horizon. Billy Tyne was an experienced captain, 37 years old. He'd been fishing since he was a teenager. He knew the Grand Banks, knew the Flemish Cap, knew how to read the ocean. His previous two trips had been disappointing, poor catches, barely enough to cover expenses. The crew needed this trip to work. Robert Brown, the boat's owner, needed it to work. There was pressure, but it wasn't reckless pressure. It was the same pressure every fishing captain faces. The economics of the trade. The Andrea Gale was a sword boat, a long liner designed specifically for swordfish. The boat set lines with thousands of baited hooks, miles of line stretching into the deep water where swordfish hunt. It was hard, dangerous work even in good weather. In bad weather, it could kill you a dozen different ways. Falling overboard, getting caught in line, hypothermia, exhaustion. But the money was good when the catch was good. Swordfish sold for premium prices. A successful trip could earn each crew member $10,000 or more. That was real money in 1991. Enough to pay rent, fix a car, help a family. Other vessels are also out there. The Satori, a 32-foot sailboat with 3 people aboard. Ray Leonard, Sue Bylander, Karen Stimson. They left Connecticut for Bermuda. Weekend sailors, freighters, fishing boats, dozens of hulls scattered across the North Atlantic, each with its own reason for being there. None know the ocean has already decided. The fishing fleet operating in the North Atlantic in late October 1991 numbered in the dozens. Most were sword boats like the Andrea Gale. Others were draggers, trawlers, longliners targeting different species. Fishing is a competitive business. Captains guard their best spots. They watch each other on radar, listen to each other on the radio, trying to read between the lines. Where are you? What are you catching? What does your weather look like? Linda Greenlaw, captain of the Hannah Bowden, was one of the few female captains in the fleet. Highly respected, skilled. She and Billy Tyne communicated regularly, sharing information, watching out for each other the way fishermen do. She was southeast of Billy's position, closer to the Grand Banks, also targeting swordfish. Her boat would be one of the last to hear from the Andrea Gale. October 28th. The small signals. The barometer drops. Not much. 5 millibars. 10. It's easy not to notice. On land, clouds thicken. In Boston, people buy umbrellas. In Gloucester, those who stayed in port look at the sea with that instinct that comes from the trade. Something doesn't smell right. Earlier in the trip, out at the Flemish Cap, the GPS marks position. 47 degrees north, 45 degrees west. They found fish. Lines are in the water. The holds are filling. The crew works through the day and into the night, hauling line, processing fish, resetting hooks. Hard physical labor in cold, wet conditions. But productive labor. This was what they'd come for. The wind begins to change direction. First it comes from the west, then it rolls to the north, then to the northeast. As if the air doesn't know where to go. Because it doesn't. Because 3 systems are pushing at the same time. The pressure keeps dropping. The Flemish Cap sits at the edge of the continental shelf, where the ocean floor drops from 200 feet to more than a mile deep. This underwater geography creates unique conditions. Cold water from the Labrador Current meets warmer water from the Gulf Stream. The collision creates upwelling, nutrient-rich water rises from the deep, feeding plankton, which feeds bait fish, which attracts predators like swordfish. It's a rich fishing ground. It's also far from land, far from help. The barometric pressure, though, told a different story. Modern fishing boats carry sophisticated instruments. The Andrea Gale had a barometer, radar, weather facts that printed out satellite images and forecasts. Billy would have seen the pressure dropping. He would have received updated forecasts via weather facts showing the developing storm. The decision calculus for a fishing captain is brutal. Stay and fish while conditions are good, knowing weather is coming, Or leave early with half-full holds losing money? There's no perfect answer. Every captain makes these calls. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. Land. The coast begins to feel it. In New York, the wind lifts newspapers in the streets. On Long Island, the waves grow. 6 feet, 10, 12. Surfers go out with boards. Reporters go to the beach with cameras. It's still a spectacle. It's still something you can watch. But in Gloucester, the old fishermen shake their heads. They know that smell, that color of the sky, that heavy silence before the wind screams. They call their sons. They check that moored boats have double lines. They close windows. The National Weather Service issues a storm warning for coastal waters. 50-knot winds, 20-foot waves. It's a serious warning, but not exceptional. Not yet. The coastal communities of New England have a relationship with the ocean that goes back generations. Fishing isn't just an industry, it is an identity. Gloucester's history is written in the names of men lost at sea. The Fisherman's Memorial statue on the waterfront shows a fisherman at the wheel looking into the storm. At the base, a plaque reads, "They that go down to the sea in ships." At the base, thousands of names are carved into stone. Gloucester fishermen lost to the sea across generations. The families of these fishermen live with constant low-level anxiety. Every time a boat goes out, there's a calculation. Will it come back? Most times, yes, but not always. The ocean takes its toll gradually, relentlessly, year after year. Chris Cotter, Bobby Shatford's girlfriend, knew this fear intimately. Bobby had been fishing for years. She'd waded through bad weather before. But something about this trip felt different. Maybe it was the timing, late October, when storms become more frequent. Maybe it was Bobby's recent talk about leaving fishing, finding something safer. Maybe it was intuition, that wordless sense that something is wrong. She couldn't have known that the last time she saw Bobby would be the last time forever. That the wave goodbye at the dock would be final. No one knows these things. That's the cruelty of it. October 28th, last contact. The Andrea Gale reports its last known position, 44 degrees north, 56.4 degrees west, about 180 miles northeast of Sable Island. The holds are filling. Billy Tyne decides to head home. It is the right decision. But there's a problem. To get back to Gloucester, they have to cross directly through where the three systems are about to meet. There's no alternative route. There's no way to go around a storm that wide. Billy receives updated forecasts by radio and fax. Stronger winds, higher seas, but the information is incomplete. Satellites don't see everything. Models don't predict everything. And there's something no forecast can tell you, what it feels like to be inside. In the early evening, around 6, Billy reaches Linda Greenlaw on the radio. The wind is already pushing into hurricane force. Linda tells him to be careful, and then the radio goes quiet. Linda Greenlaw, in her later accounts, described the weather she experienced on the Hannah Bowden. Her boat was roughly 100 miles south of the Andrea Gale's last reported position. Even at that distance, the conditions were extreme. Waves towering over the wheelhouse. Wind screaming through the rigging. The boat climbing mountains of water and sliding down the other side. The propeller spinning in air as the stern lifted clear. She survived because her boat was newer, larger, better equipped, and because she was south of the worst of it. The Andrea Gale was heading west, directly into the convergence zone. Every mile brought worse conditions. The wind built, the waves grew. The boat would have been climbing near vertical walls of water, crashing down into troughs, taking green water over the bow. Inside, the crew would have been thrown around like toys. Everything not bolted down becomes a projectile. Tools, dishes, equipment, bodies. The noise is indescribable. Wind howling, metal groaning, water hammering the hull. You can't hear yourself think. You can't communicate except by gesture. And then the radio stops working, maybe flooded. Maybe the antenna snapped. Maybe the electrical system shorted. You're alone. While the Andrea Gale runs into the storm, The Satori struggles to survive about 75 miles south of Nantucket. The 32-foot sailboat jumps like a cork. The waves are 20 feet, 25, 30. They're not waves, they're walls of black water that rise and fall with a rhythm that breaks ribs if it hits you. Ray Leonard transmits a mayday. We're losing the rudder. We're taking on water. We need help. The Coast Guard responds. The cutter Tamaroa turns into the storm. 205 feet of steel built for seas like this. But even the Tamaroa twists under the waves. Crew members tie themselves down. They vomit. They keep going. At 10 at night, the Tamaroa reaches the Satori. The waves are 40 feet. Visibility is zero. Rain falls horizontally. The wind howls. It sounds like a train, like tearing metal, like the end of the world. The Tamaroa can't get too close. If it collides with the Satori, both sink. They launch a life raft. They fail. They launch again. The waves swallow it. Third time. Ray Leonard, Sue Bylander, and Karen Stimson jump into near-freezing water around 38 degrees Fahrenheit. The human body lasts minutes there, if lucky. The Tamaroa crew throws lines. They shout orders the wind erases. Someone grabs Karen. They pull her up. Sue after, Ray last. All three are alive. The Satori is left adrift, empty, ghost. It sinks 3 days later. The rescue of the Satori crew was one of the few success stories of the perfect storm. But it nearly wasn't. The decision to abandon ship, to jump into near-freezing water in the 40-foot seas, is a decision you only make when staying aboard means certain death. Ray Leonard had been sailing for decades. He knew the ocean. He knew his boat. The Satori was well-built, well-maintained, but it was a 32-foot sailboat facing conditions designed for ships 10 times that size. When the rudder failed, the boat lost its ability to steer, to face the waves properly. A boat that can't steer into the waves will eventually broach, turn sideways, and capsize. The Tamaroa's crew performed extraordinary seamanship. Approaching a disabled vessel in those conditions requires precision that seems impossible when your own ship is being thrown around like a bathtub toy. One mistake, coming in too fast, misjudging the waves, and both vessels are lost. The crew used a technique called the lee approach, positioning the Tamaroa upwind of the Satori, creating a small zone of relatively calmer water in the ship's lee. Even that calmer water had 30-foot waves, but it was enough, barely. When Karen Stimson, Sue Bylander, and Ray Leonard jumped, they were immediately separated by the waves. The Tamaroa crew had seconds to locate each person, throw lines, pull them in. Karen was first. She grabbed the line. They hauled her up the side of the ship, hands numb, body hypothermic, barely conscious. Sue next, Ray last. 3 people, 3 lives saved. But the Tamaroa's crew knew that somewhere out there, other boats were in trouble, and they couldn't save everyone. We don't know exactly what happened inside the Andrea Gale. There are no recordings, no survivors, only inferences, physics, and silence. What we know, the boat ran into the core of the storm as the convergence tightened. Waves towered like buildings, not buildings that stand still, but walls that move, break, and weigh thousands of tons. The wind was hurricane force. Not wind you lean into, but wind that rips, peels, and turns spray into needles. At some point, the Andrea Gale stopped responding. Other vessels tried to contact it. Nothing. The Tamaroa reported losing contact. The Hannah Bowden called again and again. Silence. The most accepted hypothesis, a wave broke over the deck. The boat capsized. On a fishing boat, if you capsize, you don't recover. The weight of ice, nets, fish in the hold, everything works against you. The Andrea Gale flipped over and sank fast. Billy Tyne, Bobby Shatford, Dale Murphy, David Sullivan, Alfred Pierre, Michael Moran, 6 men, more than 2 miles deep. The bodies were never found. The physics of capsize in extreme seas is well understood. A fishing boat like the Andrea Gale has a relatively high center of gravity, especially when loaded. The weight is concentrated in the hold below deck. This normally provides stability, but it also means that if the boat rolls past a certain angle, usually around 40 to 50 degrees, it won't come back upright. In extreme seas, a boat can climb the face of a wave at a steep angle, reach the crest, and suddenly find nothing beneath the bow. The boat pitch poles, the stern lifts, the bow digs in, and the entire vessel flips end over end. Or a wave breaks directly on top of the boat, thousands of tons of water crashing down, rolling it sideways. Either scenario is unsurvivable. The crew would have had no time to react, no time to put on survival suits, no time to send a mayday. The boat would have gone down in seconds, taking everyone with it. The Andrea Gale is still down there, somewhere in the dark, with 6 men who went to work and never came home. October 30th, 1991. The storm still screams. A Sikorsky HK-60 helicopter from the Air National Guard, call sign Jolly 110, receives orders to support a rescue at sea. 5 crew members, David Ruvola, pilot, Graham Bushore, co-pilot, Jim Maioli, engineer, John Spillane, and Rick Smith, paramedics. They take off from Gabreski Air National Guard Base on Long Island. The forecast: bad. Is there an alternative? No. Halfway there, fuel drops faster than expected. The tailwinds they expected to help them aren't there. Headwinds eat them alive. Ruvola does calculations. They won't make it. They can't go back. They have to do something no pilot wants to do: ditch in massive seas. At 9:15 at night, the Jolly 110 touches water. The impact breaks the fuselage. The helicopter sinks. All 5 men jump. They wear survival suits. They have life vests. They have flares. They have minutes before hypothermia closes their muscles. The Tamaroa receives the signal, changes course. Hours later, they find 4 men alive: Ruvola, Bushore, Maioli, Spillane. Rick Smith doesn't appear. They search for him all night. All the next day, nothing. The ocean kept him. The decision to ditch a helicopter at night in a hurricane is a decision no pilot ever wants to make. Helicopters aren't designed to land on water. They have no hull, no flotation beyond small emergency pontoons. When a helicopter hits water hard, the rotors strike first, shatter, and the fuselage follows, breaking apart from the impact. David Ruvola had to calculate the exact moment to ditch: low enough to avoid a fatal fall, high enough to see the water through the darkness and spray. He brought the helicopter down as gently as physics allowed. The impact was still brutal. The windscreen cracked. Water flooded in immediately. The 5 men had seconds to get out before the helicopter sank. They inflated their life rafts. They activated their emergency beacons. They huddled together in the darkness, trying to stay close, trying to stay alive. The waves separated them almost immediately. Each man alone in the dark, in the cold, in waves that wanted to drown them. John Spillane, one of the paramedics, later described those hours in the water: the cold creeping into your core, the waves lifting you up, slamming you down, the disorientation, not knowing which way is up, the exhaustion, the temptation to just stop fighting, to let go. He survived because he didn't let go, because the Tamaroa found him, because luck, skill, and stubbornness aligned for a few crucial minutes. Rick Smith wasn't as lucky. His body was never recovered. He was 29 years old, a paramedic who died trying to save others. For 3 days, the perfect storm devours the North Atlantic. It is not a named hurricane. It begins as a massive nor'easter, and later it briefly spins up into an unnamed Category 1 hurricane. But it carries enormous energy. Waves break records, and satellites show a system the size of a country spinning out of control. On land, the destruction is visible. Beaches disappear. Houses fall into the water. Ports remain under 3 feet of foam. Gloucester's dock loses dozens of boats. In Boston, seawater pushes into low-lying waterfront streets. Around New York, coastal flooding creeps into neighborhoods near the water. But at sea, the destruction is invisible. Ships go quiet without witnesses. Men die without time to scream. Radios go silent. Lights go out. And when the ocean finishes, it leaves no evidence, only absence. The Andrea Gale. Other vessels damaged or lost. People missing. Material costs, hundreds of millions in 1991. But the real number, the one that matters, has no figure. Broken families. Children without fathers. Towns that lose their best men. When the wind drops, searches begin. The Coast Guard combs 1,000 square miles of ocean. Helicopters fly over. Boats drag. They find debris, life jackets, fuel drums, an empty raft from the Andrea Gale. But no bodies. The water is near freezing, around 38 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit. No one survives long. In Gloucester, families wait. First with hope, then with denial, then with that slow, cold acceptance that's worse than pain. Knowing there will never be closure, that there will never be a grave, that the sea simply took someone you loved and isn't going to give them back. Chris Cotter, Bobby Shatford's girlfriend, keeps waiting at the dock. Dale Murphy leaves 3 orphaned children. Billy Tyne's mother receives a call no mother should receive. The search for the Andrea Gale lasted over a week. Coast Guard cutters, patrol aircraft, even commercial vessels in the area kept watch. They found small pieces of debris, a fuel drum with the Andrea Gale's registration, an empty life raft, a propane tank, an EPIRB, emergency position indicating radio beacon, that had activated briefly before going silent. But no crew, no bodies, no survivors. The ocean had swallowed 6 men completely. The official investigation by the Coast Guard concluded that the Andrea Gale likely capsized and sank rapidly in extreme weather conditions. The report noted that the vessel was properly equipped, the crew was experienced, and the captain's decisions, while aggressive, were within the normal range of commercial fishing operations. No negligence, no recklessness, just bad luck and worse weather. That conclusion didn't comfort the families. It doesn't help to know your loved one did everything right and still died. It doesn't help to know that physics, not failure, was responsible. The uncomfortable questions. Why did they go out? Why did they keep going when the forecast worsened? Did technology fail? Did human judgment fail? Can a captain say no when his family needs to eat? Investigators analyze everything: routes, decisions, forecasts. The conclusion is brutal. Everyone did what they should do with the information they had. Billy Tyne wasn't reckless. The Coast Guard didn't fail. The forecasts weren't bad. The storm was worse. Worse than the models. Worse than experience. Worse than 1991 technology. And there's the uncomfortable lesson. Sometimes doing everything right isn't enough. Sometimes physics wins. There's no villain in this story, no conspiracy, no unforgivable error. There's a low-pressure system, there's a cold front, there's a hurricane. 3 forces that, separated, are manageable. Together, they create something that breaks the limits of what a human being can endure. The Atlantic didn't swallow the Andrea Gale with intention. It didn't punish Rick Smith for being brave. It didn't choose those families to destroy them. The ocean simply did what it does: move, spin, release energy according to laws that existed before us and will continue after. 80-foot waves aren't evil. They're possible when hurricane-force winds blow over hundreds of miles of open ocean. The difference between respect and fear is understanding that. The perfect storm of 1991 left people dead. Hundreds of millions in damages and a clear warning: technology improves, forecasts improve, communication improves. But the ocean is still the ocean. And there are days when the only intelligent thing is not to go out. Billy Tyne didn't know that. He couldn't know. That's the tragedy.